I'd like to welcome everybody into this Southwestern Pennsylvania Air Quality Town Hall, number 6 on Steelworker Voices. We're thrilled to have a number of steelworkers and related family in attendance tonight, and also presenting, and we look forward to this incredible and dynamic dialogue. Before we begin, I want to just let everybody know that this event is sponsored by the following. You'll see on the screen here. This event also is being recorded, and there is a live transcript that you can enable in your Zoom console. If you have any questions or technical difficulties, feel free to connect with me, Mark Dixon, privately in the chat. And before I hand it over to our convener, Howard Rieger, I'm going to play a short video. First, I'm going to let in a new batch. Here we go. If you're just joining, we'd like to welcome you to this town hall event, Southwestern PA Air Quality Town Hall number 6 on Steelworker Voices. And we will begin with a short video, but want to make sure you know that this event is being recorded. And we're also live streaming on Facebook. And if you can, please mute yourself. That'd be great. Or I will mute you. All right, and now for the video.
The current levels of pollution that we're all breathing are unacceptable, and we can't tolerate it more because it's killing us.
We deserve clean air now. We deserved it yesterday. Our children deserve it.
This is a paper towel off a screen from my bedroom window that I clean every week. I clean this crap off my window.
The Clairton Coke Works is one of the most toxic industrial facilities in Allegheny County.
I never missed a day running in New York City because the air smelled or because I felt like I had a breathing issue. In Pittsburgh, I've missed too many days to count.
The most livable city in America isn't livable if the air isn't breathable.
Because we've been putting up with U.S. Steel's poor environmental record for 150 years now. My mother, who passed away last year from COPD, she never smoked a cigarette in her life, but we live right here, next to U.S. Steel.
Everybody in my family's been riddled with cancer. My brother just died of cancer.
Approximately 130,000 people live within a 5-mile radius of the Coke Works. People in this area have air that's worse than 91% of the entire country.
The children are being sickened. They're developing asthma at a very early age.
I am also the mother of 2, and I fear for my children's and my family's health.
I have a 5-month-old daughter who I'm scared to raise here in this city.
A year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with chronic bronchitis that is likely due to the poor air quality in Pittsburgh.
And I can't understand how there's not enough compassion to put a stop to this.
So welcome to the fire.
If you understand that your child's asthma is approximately the result of Norfolk Southern or is going to be exacerbated by it, then you're going to come to a meeting and raise your voice.
Where petrochemical development occurs, people tend to suffer.
This area has so much more to offer than becoming a cancer alley.
We've got our work cut out for us.
The county health department is in charge of enforcing our Clean Air Act and protecting our health. Do you think they're doing a good job? No!
This anger, anxiety, and frustration are the results of residents enduring decades worth of air pollution and violations.
It's on us to be bold, and it's also on us to listen to the needs of the people who are here. They are suffering.
Welcome to the fire. 'Cause the bigger they are, the harder they fall. You build your fortress and I'll climb your walls. You got your armor, but I see your flaws. So welcome to the fire.
We are starting to elect politicians who pay attention and fight hard for clean air. And if you do not fight hard for clean air, we're done with you.
We have to hold accountable those who are harming our communities.
So welcome to the fire.
For decades, we have not been able to breathe.
There is a legal and moral obligation to make the county act.
What do we want? Clean air!
Because cancer should not be the cost of breathing in America's most livable city.
Enough is enough.
And I'm going to share with you, there are a couple of images of the Smell Pittsburgh app recently. We've had some rough days this month and last month. Here we have from March 16th, there were 187 smell complaints submitted via the Smell Pittsburgh app, and the health department doesn't publicize their numbers, so we don't know how many were submitted to the health department directly. The Liberty Claritin monitor got up to 74 micrograms per meter cubed at 4:31 a.m. that morning. That's down here in the red. Red is generally regarded as unhealthy for everybody. And then just today, we had 81 smell complaints via the Smell Pittsburgh app, and the AQI got up to 82 at the Liberty monitor. It doesn't show it as that color yet because the day is not completed. And with that, I'd like to turn the show over to Howard Rieger, our convener for this event. Howard.
Thank you, Mark. There we go. There we go. Sorry. Thank you, Mark. As Mark mentioned, I'm Howard Rieger. I am the convener of Southwestern Pennsylvania grassroots resident-led air quality town halls. And tonight you'll be hearing from voices of steelworkers. We're a racially, economically, and geographically diverse coalition of residents advocating for a healthier vision for the future of our region. One of the worst 1% of places to live in America for air pollution-related cancers, and with up to triple the national average for youth asthma. Through 5 previous town halls over the last year, we've built a coalition of over 1,000 individuals, nearly 600 of whom have tuned into one or another of our sessions. In past programs, we've heard personal testimonies about air pollution-related life-threatening illnesses that have too often taken the lives of friends and loved ones, from Clairton and Braddock, from Hazelwood and the North Side, from the Mexican War Streets and Uptown, from Homewood and Homestead, Wilkinsburg, Friendship, and many other parts of our region. We've learned about new technologies for air quality monitoring that have been developed by the CREATE Lab at CMU. You just saw images of that. Methodologies that provide the data that was on the maps that you just saw, technology that the Allegheny County Health Department actually participated in helping to shape, and yet they failed to use it. Why have they failed to use it? We've reached out to the CEOs and chairs of Allegheny Health Network and UPMC, hoping to establish a dialogue about their taking a leadership role in addressing our pollution-related health hazard. One would think that the fact that our area is frequently in the top 10 worst places in America for air pollution, and sometimes very often number 1 worst, you would have thought that that would have led them to act. But one would be wrong in making that assumption. Their answer has been silence. Could it be because they profit more from treatment, but don't profit from prevention? The Allegheny Conference on Community Development created to address air pollution in Pittsburgh in the 1940s, has also refused to acknowledge our current reality and has ignored our outreach to them. When the conference convened its 75th anniversary gala nearly 3 years ago to shape its vision for what they called the next 75, U.S. Steel, by far our region's worst polluter, was a major funder of that event. Could that be why they didn't respond? And add to that the irony that the president and CEO of Highmark Health, the parent company of Allegheny Health Network, and the president and CEO of UPMC's health plan are both leaders of the conference, and it's easy to understand why. But two wrongs do not make a right. As a follow-up to tonight's town hall, we hope to convene an intergovernmental coalition of elected officials willing to partner with us in making the case to local leadership that the future of our region depends upon Pittsburgh's becoming the epicenter of the solution rather than one of the very worst contributors to the problem. Some of those elected officials have agreed to join tonight to hear this program. May the voices of those who have suffered from the poor business practices and frankly the negligence of U.S. Steel, the workers in the mill who we'll hear from tonight, past presenters who have poured their hearts out with emotional testimony about their lived experiences as residents of environmental justice communities, may those voices convince those officials of the urgency of this request. Together, we can make a difference. After the formal presentations from the Steelworkers, it'll be your turn to speak. So now I'm going to turn it over to the first Steelworker who will speak. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Stout. I worked for 10 years for U.S. Steel, 1977 to 1987. I was the grievance chairman at the Homestead Steel Mill in Homestead, PA. And I think it's very important to give a little perspective on U.S. Steel, a little bit of history to understand why we are so adamant in claiming that they are abandoning the Mon Valley once again, as they have done in the past. Just briefly, I want to say that our local union back in Homestead in the 1970s and early 1980s was a bit different than most of the local unions today. We believe firmly that the union had a responsibility not only inside the mills and inside the workplace, but outside the workplace too. That in fact, the air we breathe, the water we drank was the same air breathed and water drank by the people that lived in the surrounding communities, that we had an integral connection to those communities. And secondly, that we needed to be involved in the political process outside of the mill to understand and move things forward inside the mill. U.S. Steel, in my experience, and I'm just going to relate my experience, has a 50-year track record of abandoning the communities of the Mon Valley and abandoning the workers. Everybody knows back in the 1970s, U.S. Steel had 30,000 steel workers at 7 facilities. That went down by 1987 when I left to 3,000 steel workers at 3 facilities. In 1978 and 1979, when our local union, we seized power, a new administration came in at 1397. The first thing, order of business, besides what we were doing inside the mill, is we sued U.S. Steel they were proposing to build a Conneaut mill up in Conneaut, Ohio, which would in fact shut the Mon Valley down and at the same time destroy the environment up there. So we joined with a number of community organizations and environmentalists up in the Conneaut area, and we sued U.S. Steel and took them to court. And within a year, U.S. Steel backed off their plans to build the Conneaut mill. In 1980, we sued U.S. Steel again, this time for the water and the air quality in the Mon Valley, and especially in the areas around their mills, Homestead, Clairton, Braddock, et cetera. By May, and I want to say this, that we understood at 1397 that we had to take U.S. Steel on not just inside the plant. We had to take them on in the political arena, we had to take them on in the courts, and we had to take them on in the streets. And that's what 1397 did. We demonstrated against U.S. Steel, we sued U.S. Steel, and we took them through the political ringer back in those days. In May 1981, in lieu of the lawsuit, U.S. Steel settled and decided and agreed with the EPA and also the county commissioners that they were going to modernize the Homestead mill, put a new caster and a basic oxygen furnace and a wastewater treatment facility in Homestead, and gave us a written agreement on May 5th, 1981 to do that. By November 1981, 6 months later, 2 months after the layoffs and the shutdowns ensued in the Mon Valley, including the massacre on September 13, 1981, when they threw thousands of people, including 1,800 from Homestead out on the streets, U.S. Steel backed off of their agreement to modernize the Mon Valley Works and Homestead and put $6.4 billion up and bought Marathon Oil and began the diversification and globalization that has resulted in what we see today. Good for the stockholders, good for the CEO, bad for the communities, and bad for the steelworkers. This kind of betrayal has been going on for 50 years. They ended up shutting down, as we all know, 6 different facilities, kept 3 open with 3,000 workers in them. So out of 30,000 workers, we had 3,000 left by the time I left the plant in 1987. During the next course of a number of contract negotiations with which Rose Beasy can speak better to, is they promised to deal with the pollution problem at Clairton. They promised to put the cogeneration unit in there 3 different times in writing and reneged on those promises. Fast forward December 24th, 2018, an explosion at the Clairton Works. An incredible amount of sulfate is released into the atmosphere. The pollution is off the charts. Once again, U.S. Steel gets sued by representatives of the community and the Clean Air Council, and I believe Penn Environment. In lieu of the lawsuit and the pitiful fines they paid, U.S. Steel held a major press conference and agreed to modernize the Mon Valley and put $1.5 billion of new equipment in at the Edgar Thomson Works in Braddock and North Braddock and at Clairton Works, including the cogeneration unit once again. Within 6 months of that announcement, after much fanfare and all the politicians, the majority of them in Allegheny County, from John Fetterman to Rich Fitzgerald, and all these big shots appeared in press conferences with U.S. Steel, rah-rah on them, patting them on the back, thanking them for all their major investments they were going to make. Within 6 months, U.S. Steel scaled it back, put a small press release out, and said, well, we're only going to invest half of what we said we were going to invest, the $1.5 billion. Later on, about another 6 months later, actually 4 months later, they announced that they were buying Rieger Steel in Arkansas and that they were going to end up buying the entire plant. First, they bought 49% and eventually bought the entire plant, somewhere around $3 billion. They then scaled back as the COVID pandemic set in and discontinued announced they were discontinuing indefinitely their plans on any investment in the Mon Valley. Fast forward another 3 or more months later, they then announced that they had bought the entirety of Rieger Steel down in Arkansas, which, by the way, is a non-union right-to-work state mini mill. And they discontinued their investment in the Mon Valley and bought the entirety of Rieger Steel. At the beginning of the pandemic, they temporarily suspended. Then 6 months into the pandemic, they announced publicly that they were not investing anything in the Mon Valley, whatever. They didn't say forever. They just said, we're not going to invest anything in the Mon Valley. And then they turned around and at the same time announced that they were going to spend $3 billion building a brand new, state-of-the-art, from scratch mini mill with an electric arc furnace down in Arkansas. Mon Valley was not in the running. They didn't even address the issue of why they weren't investing in the Mon Valley. My point being, this type of betrayal has been going on at least since the 1970s when I worked for U.S. Steel, and it continues to this very day. We took a full page out, and the people that are speaking on this call took a full page ad out in the op-ed in the Post-Gazette and also the Pittsburgh Business Times. And we not only related this history of betrayal, but we demanded that U.S. Steel invest the electric arc furnace operation, mini mill operation in the Mon Valley. And if they didn't invest in the Mon Valley and reneged on their promises, then they should walk away and clean this place up and let somebody come in here and redevelop that site and make sure that we have union scale jobs. There is absolutely no reason why U.S. Steel cannot put an electric arc furnace with renewable energy in the Mon Valley and clean that garbage up down there. Unfortunately, U.S. Steel bastardized the old saying where you throw the baby out with the bathwater. They didn't throw the bathwater.
There was some extreme weather where Mike Stout was, and I'm wondering if that maybe has taken him offline for now.
Well, I think we should just move on.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, very much. And hopefully you're doing okay there with all the extreme weather. Howard, please proceed.
Well, we want to come on with the next presenter.
Hello.
There you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Hi, Mark. We can hear you.
Okay, my name is Mark Fallon. I'm a resident of the Steel Valley. I've lived here most of my 64 years. I'm a former steelworker. I worked 13 years at Clareton, and I'm also a former public school teacher. Both of my grandfathers, I'm just going to talk about how the U.S. Steel's pullout and the decline of the steel industry has affected my hometown of Homestead, Mount Hall, West Homestead. Both my grandparents were steel workers. My grandfather, my father's side, worked at Homestead for 44 years. My mother's father worked at Mesta for 42 years. Growing up, all my friends' parents were steel workers. Most of the neighborhood was steel workers. I just remember growing up in Homestead, the 8th Avenue, how busy it was. So many businesses, so many, just an amazing place to grow up. When I graduated high school in 1975, I went to college. When all my friends went to the mill, I'd come home on weekends. I'd hear them telling stories about, how little they worked on night turn or whatever, sleeping, driving their brand new Grand Prix. 1977, I'm up at IEP working for $2 an hour in the cafeteria, and then it slowly declined. In 1980, I joined the military. By the time I got out in 1986, all my friends had left. All the mills had closed. It was a totally different place. Unbelievable. And for years after that, you drive through Duquesne, drive through Homestead, and see these empty mill sites and wonder what the heck happened. It's just they abandoned this place. And when I was teaching, at the end of each school year, I'd have a small lesson on Homestead and the history of Homestead, with majority of it speaking about the Homestead strike of 1892. But one point I always made with my students that in 1892, that the government had a choice, that they could back the steelworkers or they could back the company, and they chose to back the company. And I told my students that nothing has changed in 100 and some years. To this day, I'm very involved with the bike trail, the Gap Trail, and I've made several requests over the last 5-10 years of U.S. Steel to help us with the trail down at the waterfront, the Hayes Mansion, the hillside, and I get very little response. And it's just a crime how they've abandoned this area, including Braddock and Clareton and all these towns that's what built this country. And it's really a shame. And I hope something can be done about it. And I hope someone at U.S. Steel wakes up, or some of the politicians will wake up and do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think Will Jones, who was going to speak next, is having some problems getting online. So we're going to go to Patty DeMarco next. Patty?
Thank you so much, Howard, and welcome everybody to this town hall. I am so pleased to see so many people showing an interest in our future. Steelworkers, well, first of all, I'm the vice president of the Forest Hillsborough Council. I chair the Congress of Neighboring Communities, which is 41 communities surrounding Pittsburgh. I am first generation Italian, the daughter and the granddaughter of people who worked in the steel mills and for the railroad. And my mother organized the Allegheny Administrators Association. So union strong all my life. So steelworkers have been the backbone of the Mon Valley for generations. The wealth of the American middle class rests on the unions of Pittsburgh, standing together to fight literally for fair wages, safe work.
Oh, now it's Patty's turn for an internet challenge. Patty, are you there?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can see other people moving, but I think Patty may have dropped off, or she's not gone. She's just, I'm going to text her real fast. She doesn't have the extreme weather.
It's U.S. Steel.
It does appear that Willard Jones is here now, and perhaps he could speak while we're waiting for Patty.
Are you online, Will? Will?
Will is in the room. Hopefully, there is Will. Will?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Patty was starting to speak and she lost connectivity. So you showed up at a perfect time.
Well, my name is Willard Jones. I've been involved with the union for about 9 years in Clareton, and enjoy the benefits that these union jobs have. Not sure why. The union's not starting to wake up and see what's going on down through that valley. The awareness.
Willard,
yeah.
Are you able to share your video, or would you prefer not to?
How's that?
Let's give it a second. No video yet. I sent a prompt. There we go. Yeah, great. All right, please continue. Thank you.
Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you perfectly.
Okay. I'm kind of not prepared, but anyhow, I've been away from the mill for almost a year now because I had an injury, so I'm a little bit out of touch. But what I see, we got a bunch of young guys that came in, and I just don't. Without the union's involvement in waking it up and seeing what's going on through that valley, we're not going to get in touch with them because they just don't care. I mean, they don't see it, and that's what worries me. Because the union's the only way you're going to have decent benefits. My dad was a steel worker at ATI, and we had benefits. My mom had benefits all the way up till she died last year, 92. I mean, I just don't see what these people are seeing or what they're thinking. We need to. Me and Rose are planning on getting together to try to wake this union up. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Or we're just going to be. I don't know what we're going to be.
Could I just ask you a quick question? It's Howard. When we spoke initially, you talked about some of the attitudes about union workers when you were down at the union hall vis-a-vis, where they were pointing a finger, and it wasn't at the company, it was at the environmental.
Yeah, it's the political environment out there right now. It's crazy what these guys, how they think to what, it's almost like the company's got a hold on them, and they're siding with the company thinking that, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. It's, I don't know how we're going to get it turned around, because we need all these young guys to realize what's going on. Just, before anything's going to happen, I think. I mean, from our end of it.
Well, thank you. Is Patty back? Patty's back? Good. Thank you.
Good to see Mark on there.
Could I say something quick? This is Jim McHugh.
Well, we're going to open it up after the presentations. You'll have a chance then, and we'll make sure you're the first guy, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this is
video,
Patty. Patty, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you well, and but we can't see you.
Okay, does that work?
Perfect.
Okay. All right, I'm so sorry. I just suddenly lost my internet for some reason. This never happens. This is so weird. Anyway, I was talking about how wonderful the steelworkers are and how they've contributed to our history and built the middle class, actually set the conditions for the Industrial Revolution that won with the blood, sweat, and tears of our grandfathers. What we retain from that time is the strong, tough, smart, dedicated workers of the steel industry, the grit and determination that faced down Frick and Carnegie, the solidarity that made Union Strong a reality we still have. We need to come together again, this time to face a transformation from the technologies and processes of the 1800s to the modern manufacturing technologies of today and into tomorrow. The laws of nature are not negotiable. Our systems of energy and materials that rest on fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal must be transformed to systems that can be sustained on renewable resources. We have the skills to do that. We can be the masters of the circular materials management economy. We know how to make things. We know how to make things work. All the skills are here, ready for the new challenges of the 21st century. Make no mistake, U.S. Steel is moving on to non-union states like Arkansas, where they can still get away with treating the workers like units of production, to be paid as little as possible and work to death. We're better than that. We will not stand by to be laid off one by one, pitted against each other, and sent in pitiful, useless frustration to sort out our fate alone. We can stand as the mighty steelworkers of the Mon Valley and craft our own future, a better future, a brighter future, a future we control. Here's what we can do. First, recognize that we have the power to shape this transformation. Secondly, we can celebrate our accomplishments as workers, document our strengths, our skills, and our assets, both the human capital of our workforce, the infrastructure that stands ready to serve, and the intellectual capital of our city. Get a marketing team together, make the city and the county and the Allegheny Conference pay for it. Third, decide what kind of companies we want to work for and get them to come here. Take the show on the road and recruit from among the firms that are looking forward for manufacturing the goods and structures of the next industrial revolution. The batteries and storage systems, the anaerobic digesters and fuel cells that run on biohydrogen, the bioplastic from industrial hemp, the rail cars and engines that run electric public transit systems, the manufacturers of solar panels and wind systems, and the modern communication systems that will connect the modern electric grid. Get a team of people together, maybe Matt's students, to research the options and send out the marketing team. Recruit your next boss as a partner. Come to Pittsburgh and work with us. Fourth, demand a seat at the table where the decisions are being made. Workers' voices are critically needed at the Department of Commerce and Economic Development. We need a seat at the Allegheny Conference and the Southwestern Pennsylvania Planning Commission. We need to be there when the city and the county are planning how to spend grant dollars and development dollars. All the products of the research institutes and the innovation centers should be built right here in Pittsburgh, not China, not Germany, not Mississippi, not Arkansas. If we aren't at the table, we are on the menu. Fifth, we have to demand that U.S. Steel leave a clean slate. Too often, industry owners pack up and leave town, investing in a new place, and leave the taxpayers of the Mon Valley to clean up the mess. They donate the property for a tax-deductible charitable contribution, and then the taxpayers have to clean it up from generations of abuse and pollution. We don't want their garbage. The United States Steel must clean up their own mess and leave a clean site for us to rebuild on. We have the power to make the manufacturing hub of the 21st century right here in Pittsburgh, serving America and serving the world. We have the power, union strong. Let's use it wisely and use it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Rose?
Okay, I'm Rose Beasy. I'm an electrician at the Clairton Coke Works, U.S. Steel's plant. I'm also a former USW local union officer, and I've served on various committees at the local union level. It's no secret the industry in the valley is a source of pollution. The former power plants in El Rama and the Mitchell plant in Courtney, Eastman Chemical, which was recently purchased by Sintemer, all the commercial traffic, and obviously the U.S. Steel Valley plants. They've all been some of the biggest violators. Most of them would rather pay the fines as a cost of doing business. They'll litigate to get the fines lessened or have the violations lifted altogether, or they'll enter into consent decrees rather than permanently fix the issues. As an employee at U.S. Steel and a past USW officer and safety committee chair, I've seen this firsthand. When I was on the safety committee, I went to Washington, D.C., where U.S. Steel lawyers argued to have the category and fine of an OSHA violation decreased, but they never, ever disputed the violation. The money that they spent to do this would have been better spent in the plants, fixing what needed to be fixed. As in the 1980s, these valley plants are again aging. Not enough money is being spent on the upgrades and the technology in these valley plants. Not only are the environmental equipment upgrades needed, but they're slow in coming, and the machinery that's unrelated to emissions is also becoming old and obsolete and in need of replacement. And this is faster and more costly than it appears U.S. Steel is willing to accommodate. I could go on about this, but it would just be more of the same dialogue, and I think Patty and Mike and the others have said a lot about this. Instead, I'd like to focus on the need for the workers, the community, and the environmentalists to unite together and prevent a repeat of the 1980s, when the valley was decimated and the people were lost in the shuffle with literally no place to go. We all breathe the same air and drink the same water. We travel the same roads. We shop in the same stores. This is our valley. It's not the environmentalist valley alone, or the workers' valley alone, or the residents' valley alone. Our segregation has been facilitated by the companies like U.S. Steel that try to keep us divided and at odds. Unfortunately, for too long, we have been working alone instead of incorporating our efforts. An example is the campaign to close the Duquesne Light Plant in El Rama after repeated attempts to have First Energy operate it within regulations. There was no push for worker alternatives in the campaign. No plan for what happens to them. I'm certain it was not on purpose. It just wasn't a part of the scope of the campaign. Neither was a replacement for the tax base provided by the plant for the community or any consideration of small businesses' losses as a result of workers not traveling to and from work. I repeat, it was not intentional. It just wasn't part of the scope. So what's the answer? Well, we need to change the scope. This year is a contract year for U.S. Steel, and it would be very inclusive if the USW would bargain better environmental and community stewardship language, something more concrete than a basic committee structure or discuss and notify language. The locals should invite community environmental leaders to local meetings to present their ideas and find meaningful ways to cooperate and incorporate our agendas. Likewise, communities' environmental groups should do the same at their business meetings. We should invite each other. Together, we need to push for good green jobs in the footprint of the industries that spewed poison into the air and water, and where workers won't be displaced and communities left desolate. As Mike talked about, U.S. Steel promised the construction of a state-of-the-art endless caster and rolling facility. Within a year, they reneged on that promise. Workers blame the Allegheny County Health Department, the environmental groups, and community leaders. Some of them spewed the same old rhetoric, if you don't like it, move. U.S. Steel did nothing to dispel the myth of why they changed their plans. They like it when we're at odds. Toomey made an initial statement. He wanted an investigation, then silence. The USW was upset, but they too fell silent. Local politicians were lackluster with a response as well. Fast forward, and U.S. Steel announces 2 electric arc furnaces to be built, but doesn't say where. Again, complete silence from political and unions. The same silence occurs when they announce the plans to build in a right-to-work state, Arkansas. Oh, and that endless casting and rolling facility that they said they canceled, it's going to be integrated into those electric arc furnace footprints. So it wasn't canceled. It was just relocated. Workers in the plant still blame the environmentalist, community, and the Allegheny County Health Department. But a few of us suspect other reasons. They build in a right-to-work state. Is this U.S. Steel's exit from organized labor as well as the Valley? Corporate welfare. Arkansas passed Senate Bill 10, which gives funding for long-term tax breaks to business dealing in recycling. They consider the electric arc furnaces, since they use recycled steel, recycling. And also, U.S. Steel promised high-wage jobs. U.S. Steel wouldn't lie about those jobs, would they? And Entergy, which is Arkansas's energy provider, is building a facility to power the plant using green energy. Why isn't this front page news? Because U.S. Steel wants the workers, the community, and the environmentalists at odds with one another. More importantly, why are the local and state politicians here not asking questions? As much as I disdain corporate welfare, did Duquesne Light offer cheaper rates or green energy? Did the politicians offer anything? Who knows? All we get is silence. That is until a group of 6 people composed of environmentalists, community members, and workers wrote an op-ed together outlining our position and possible solutions to both U.S. Steel staying and what comes after if they leave. Our ideas comprised a mixed agenda that contains all of our interests. No egos, sensationalists, or grandstanders, just common sense for the good of it. I had to read that because if not, I've gotten off topic. But Will said it really well. There's an attitude, and especially among some of the younger workers in that, and it's hard to pinpoint why, but they've aligned themselves with the corporations rather than looking at the whole picture. And we really need the community, and we really need the workers, and we really need the environmentalists on the same page, or we can kiss the Valley goodbye. And it's plain and simple. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Rose. And Matt, you'll wrap it up, and then we'll have a brief video that'll just show some highlights of commentary in previous town halls, and then turn it over to our attendees to say what's on their mind. Matt?
Thank you, Howard. It's an honor to be here and to follow all of the speakers tonight. I'm not a steelworker, but I'm a descendant of 3 prior generations of steelworkers, all working in Braddock at Edgar Thomson. And I grew up in a union family, extended family, and a union household. A May 1982 New York Times article titled "Maverick of the Steelworkers" tells a story of Ron Wyson, the president of the United Steelworkers Local 1397 in Pittsburgh. This is the union that Mike Stout was a member of and spoke about earlier. In the story, Wyson had a theory about the company that had employed him and the union that represented him for 28 years. U.S. Steel and the union were trying to get out of the steel business, he said. We've become a minority in our own union. Wyson said the International did little to try to stop U.S. Steel from investing over $6 billion in the acquisition of Marathon Oil, a deal completed on March 11, 1982. With nearly 90,000 basic steelworkers on indefinite and temporary layoff, with aging plants like Homestead badly in need of capital improvements, the money, he said, would have been better spent on putting in new machines to keep the plants going and people working. U.S. Steel, to quote what he said, could have modernized every one of its steel plants in the country with the $6 billion it spent on Marathon Oil. That was 40 years ago. I was 12 years old at the time. 4 years later, I started working at Kennywood Park for a summer job. I worked beside steelworkers and their children who struggled to pay the bills when so many jobs fled the Mon Valley. A job at Kennywood was all there was for many adults. We were making $3.15 per hour. Many of my friends that I played Little League with had their families and lives permanently disrupted because of the staggering job losses and emotional toll it took on families throughout the Mon Valley. Many of these friends and families never made it. It's only because of luck that somehow my family made it through this period. We are experiencing history repeating itself. Only this time U.S. Steel's not exiting the steel business, it's exiting the Mon Valley, as it spent, as you heard, $6 billion acquiring Big River Steel, a non-union plant in Arkansas. Just today in the Post-Gazette, there was an article titled, U.S. Steel Facility First Steel Mill in North America to Win Certification from Responsible Steel. This is their attempt to greenwash their way out of the Mon Valley. In the article, U.S. Steel CEO David Burritt stated, and I'm quoting, "This marks an important milestone on our journey to build a more sustainable future for our customers, company, colleagues, communities, and the planet." Apparently, this certification program ignores fundamental practices in sustainability reporting and performance by entirely omitting the material interests of key stakeholders. Declaring material stakeholder interest has been standard practice for at least 8 years for the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI, the key organization that manages and sets standards for companies conducting sustainability reporting. Not surprisingly, U.S. Steel's business model continues to be based on obfuscation, misdirection, and, new to the picture, greenwashing. If U.S. Steel had done a materiality assessment as required by the GRI, it would have had to openly disclose that the Allegheny County Health Department has issued at least 14 enforcement orders and notices of violation to the U.S. Steel Clairton Coke Works since April of 2019, the time that the Coke Works fire episode was supposedly fixed. ACHD has fined U.S. Steel over $9.03 million for penalties associated with emissions violations over the same period. U.S. Steel is paying approximately $376,000 per quarter on average in penalties since January 1st of 2020. This is in addition to the $2.7 million U.S. Steel paid as part of the June 2019 settlement agreement for violations from 2017 and 2018. This history of paying fines instead of reducing emissions indicates a willingness of U.S. Steel to operate in a pay-to-pollute relationship. These emissions harm our region's residents, and this information is material to any sustainability declaration. Because of ongoing legal proceedings, there has yet to be any penalties to account for the 100 days U.S. Steel operated the coke works without pollution controls from Christmas Eve 2018 through April of 2019, just 3 years ago, releasing the equivalent of 11 to 13 years worth of regular heavy pollution in those 100 days. There's yet to be any accounting for numerous documented emissions at the U.S. Steel Edgar Thomson Works, a plant where there's been EPA and Department of Justice investigation going on for nearly 5 years. All of this is clearly material to any sustainability designation. Any meaningful sustainability certification would note that these are material concerns and require that they be addressed. Apparently, responsible steel allows the perpetuating of harms on hundreds of thousands of people without concern. Allegheny County is in the top 1% of counties for cancer risk due to point source air pollution. Nearly 90% of the point source cancer risk is attributable to coke oven emissions, and 90% of those emissions come from one source, the Clairton Coke Works facility. Group Against Smog and Pollution reported our region's air has been in violation of the state's hydrogen sulfide standard more than 54 times in 2021. That's what gives the rotten-like egg stench smell from coke oven emissions. Based on the EPA's highest 10 nowcast AQI locations data, which tracks which regions of the country rank in the top 10 worst air sheds based on air quality index information on an hourly basis, our county has appeared in the top 10 worst list over 95 times in 2021. That's 26% of all days last year. And this year, out of the first 95 days of 2022, including today, our air has been in this worst top 10 places 47 times, which is almost half the time, and is ranked #1 worst air at least 15 of these days, which is 16% of the time. These facts are certainly material to any GRI or any sustainability designation. But apparently this is all okay according to Responsible Steel. It also appears that abandoning these stakeholders is also okay, as well as likely leaving them with large toxic brownfield sites as U.S. Steel shifts its investment to a right-to-work state with 600 non-union workers to replace the same steelmaking capacity in the Mon Valley where 3,500 workers face an uncertain future. And while U.S. Steel starts exiting its pension obligations. So to quote David Burritt again, this marks an important milestone on our journey to build a more sustainable future for our customers, company, colleagues, community, and planet. Think about that. Now, what have our regional economic development and healthcare leaders said about this ongoing tragedy? As many of our prior speakers pointed out, there's been an eerie silence. This silence embodies cynical political calculation to avoid questions about how we ended up here, the likely abandonment of the Mon Valley, its communities, its highly skilled unionized manufacturing workforce. This silence insults generations of workers who sacrificed their lives to build the infrastructure of our country and the foundation of our region and its historic prosperity. We on this call are steelworkers, retired steelworkers, and multi-generational descendants of steelworkers. We know the importance of good-paying union jobs. We support community and worker health, clean air, clean water, and a clean environment for us and our children and future generations. One conclusion from this situation is to give ourselves over to resignation. Interpret the repeating of history as just another example of how much power U.S. Steel and regional leadership hold over us. We should just accept our fate, cynically endure health problems, pollution episodes, and collect whatever pay we can and accept that we will need to clean up these sites once they're abandoned. What I want to say about that is this is exactly the attitude that leads to the hollowing out of everyone in our region. I've seen this very path chosen by too many people over the years. I've seen too many families and communities destroyed by this attitude. It's time to go in a different direction. We want investments in the Mon Valley and its world-class, highly skilled workforce. We want a vision centering on improving the health of communities and workers with reliable leadership and good faith partners, a commitment to respecting residents' and workers' rights to clean air and water, investments in people, workers and communities, not in corporations that harm communities, reliable family-sustaining jobs in industries, whether steel or not, that help, not hurt local communities, and solutions addressing short-term air pollution problems and long-term climate necessities lacking in past and current proposed plans for the Mon Valley. We deserve more than greenwashing. We deserve more than using a 40-year-old playbook that perpetuates community harms and worker anxiety. We need real leadership, leadership that we together assert. This begins with the notion of esteem. The esteem of our state constitutional rights to clean air and clean water. The esteem that we have, to paraphrase FDR, freedom from want and freedom from fear because of a fair economic system. We esteem that the health of our communities is fundamental. The needs of our communities are fundamental. Meaningful work does not need to damage our homes and communities. Even U.S. Steel acknowledges the importance of these things. This is the source of their impulse to greenwash. They esteem to be perceived as virtuous. But greenwashing, harming workers and community members, and abandonment are not the path of virtue. The people we've heard on this call today, their stories assert that we're capable of something more than the past and what U.S. Steel is trying to force upon us. It's a chance to build something that we can all be proud of. Let's stop allowing the stories of the past, stories filled with pollution, health damage, social trauma, and anxiety, being the touchstone for our communities. Let's together shape where we are headed based on what we want, what we need, and what we know. Let's start writing our own stories and hold our leaders accountable to them. And let's hold entities that damage our communities, our families, and our daily experiences accountable too. It is what equity, justice, and virtue require for us to move forward. Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you so much, Matt. Yeah, go ahead, Howard.
No, thank you.
Yeah, Matt, thank you for those stirring words, and thank you, Rose Beasy, Patricia DeMarco, Will Jones, Mark Fallon, and Mike Stout, all for your compelling, thoughtful, experienced words tonight. We'll be opening it up for discussion soon. And I also wanted to extend, Mike sends his apologies. I exchanged a chat with him, and he told me that it was raining so hard that you can't see 10 feet out the window. Please extend his apologies to the group. And so I just wanted to let you all know that he did not leave for lack of trying. He was eager to be here, and we're glad to have him here. So with that, I would like to share very briefly. We have a survey that we are sharing periodically in the town hall series, and I have there's a bit.ly link here, and I'll put it in the chat. If there is a local air quality issue in your area of the region, we'd love to hear from you and consider it for future focus in this town hall format. And then, so you can see the chat with the link, and you can submit your ideas through that survey. And now I'm going to share a brief compilation of some previous comments during this sort of open discussion session that we're about to enter into, just to give you a sense of some of the comments that have come before, so we can build the conversation forward, build off each other and each other's words and each other's work. And so gear up your questions and your thoughtful comments for after the video, and we will see you in just a moment.
The Allegheny County Health Department has failed to protect the people of Allegheny County time and time again.
We are one of the dirtiest communities in the country.
Asthma, just like air pollution, is an issue with disparities. African Americans are 5 times more likely to go to the emergency room for asthma, and they're actually 3 times more likely to die of asthma.
Imagine living with the smoke, soot, rotten egg smell, burnt and industrial smells for decades, knowing that it impacts you, your family, your children, your parents, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents. Now, take another moment to imagine what it's like to keep your windows closed and not go outside, but the smells still permeate your house and the odors are so strong that you can taste them.
Most of the people in the Mon Valley gotten so used to smelling this crap that they don't even realize they're smelling it. They don't realize what is making them sick. And they don't realize how many people are dying.
My doctor told me, pack up and move out of Clarendon. I would get out of Clarendon. Don't even stay here. It's dangerous for you.
They can either clean Clarendonville up or shut it down. That's the only 2 choices they have, I believe. And they're not doing too good at cleaning it up.
I don't think there's enough focus on economic growth that we won't see if the air is not cleaned up. Buildings will be shuttered, projects that are planned will be canceled, and I'm thinking about past the pandemic. It's air quality that is most likely to stop our growth and our recovery.
I ask myself regularly, can we safely grow old here and raise our son? I'm not certain of that answer now, but I do believe that a groundswell of resident action will be our key to positive change.
We are currently requesting an investigation by Attorney General Josh Shapiro into the Allegheny County Health Department's regulatory failings that have left countless residents vulnerable and exposed to these environmental violations and illegal pollution.
I'm tired of repeating my lived experiences over and over. I'm tired of witnessing the death of loved ones and neighbors. I don't want my grandchildren and great-grandchildren to be telling this same story. I pray there will come a day that this problem of daily air pollution no longer plagues the great city of Clarendon and the Mon Valley.
We all deserve power without pollution and energy without injustice.
Alrighty. And so now we're going to move into the community discussion. And I think that we had Jim McHugh up first, and then we'll move on to Sue and then John, who have their hands up. If people want to add comments comments or ask questions in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. But we're really here for open dialogue, building off of the really thoughtful, wonderful, insightful commentary that was shared earlier on this in this event. So please, Jim, go ahead and unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
I started out in Greenfield. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I started out in Greenfield and I'm in Hazelwood now. I think I'm not going to live a super long life. I made it to 69. But there's something, I have COPD very badly. And there's something that I saw the end of, and how they screwed us, the
LTV that used to be J&L Coke Works. I remember when I was a kid in Greenfield, the constant fall of dust. And here, there was, I know that there was an X-ray which was called the Hazelwood X-ray, because people knew, the medical staff knew that anyone with this much crap in their lungs lived in Hazelwood. And I saw how they cheated the community. I just really cut my political teeth. Yeah, I just never really believed human beings could be so unconsciously cruel to each other. They knew there was a constant death, an increase in death rate. I don't have a lot to say except that we all know from different angles. This has got to stop, and I say revolution by whatever means necessary, short of violence. We have to do this if we're to survive as a species. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Sue. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, hello.
Thanks everybody for inviting me. I think Jenny sent the link to join, and I appreciate it. You've ridden home from work with me, and now we're cooking dinner. But anyway, I live in the Mon Valley in the home bill section. I have a grandson that lives next door and two grandsons that live 2 doors down. My two youngest, 4 doors down, they have horrible lung issues, asthma, constantly sick. I can show you the dust on my tables that builds up. I can dust at 10 a.m. and the living room's dusty again at 12:30. The air's horrible. As far as what to do with the young people that don't seem to give a crap about the unions and are siding with the companies, it's education. It's lack of education. We have to get into the school boards, and we have to start teaching the young people what unions are doing, what they're for, what they do, how they protect us and the community. It's been going on for a long time since the mills closed. We haven't taught unions. I'm a ATU member. I drive a bus for a living, and we're having the same issues where they want to switch to a 401k. They don't know what the pension, how good it is. It's just a sheer lack of education. And we have to take some of the blame for that, but we have to fix it. And again, just stick together. And I agree, we need a revolution. And Rosemary, I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. John Detweiler.
Yeah, I have a question about this negotiated settlement from, I think it's been a couple of years now, and some of us tried to complain about it at the time, where money that U.S. Steel paid in penalties was not going to go to the Clean Air Fund. It was going to go to some sort of slush fund that U.S. Steel would distribute through a committee. Does anybody know, first of all, whether any money has reached that fund? And secondly, does anybody know whether the municipalities that were supposed to benefit from that pot of money have any position on what's happened to their money? You see big numbers in the newspapers, but of course, that's before U.S. Steel's lawyers get involved. But I wondered if there's any update on that community benefits or whatever that thing was called, because I've lost track of it.
Yeah, there has been money that's flowed, and I think if Matt's on, Matt could give us specifics on that. And unfortunately, with these things, sometimes even if there's money that flows, it ends up getting used for, buying a police car or something and not addressing the needs on the ground, unfortunately. But Matt, would be helpful if you just share a little bit of what you know about that.
Thanks, Howard. For this particular issue, I want to thank, is it Sinan, for posting in the chat the blog that the folks at Group Against Smog and Pollution did in terms of investigatory work about the community benefit and trust. So what we do know is that the communities are afforded a certain allotment of funding based off of population, but they all have community representatives that meet for this trust and decide how that money is to be spent. The only accounting of it, I do believe, is they need to post a report on the website for the trust once a year. Most of what's been figured out from this is through conversations with people who know what's going on. So as Howard has mentioned, some of the municipalities have bought construction vehicles, pickup trucks, dump trucks. Some have spent it on road paving. One community, I believe it's Glassport, has spent it on what was designated as community enhancements. And that's basically all that we know. This was, John, you gave comments on this at that July 2019 hearing, as did so many other people, cautioning about this very thing, about how this, in some ways, U.S. Steel, it pays a fine, but that money gets rerouted right back into the community and in some ways becomes viewed as a community investment. And so, it keeps communities beholden to almost paternalistic influence of funds flowing there. And the money's not being spent on pollution mitigation efforts. There have been numerous groups working with VCAN to try to get money for air filters and cleaners distributed throughout homes in the Mon Valley. They've only been able to get about 50 of those out not through that fund, but through foundation support money. And there's been resistance to spending that money on mitigation equipment to help protect the lungs of people who live in closest proximity to the Clairton Coke Works. So it is a problematic situation. Getting it changed or unwound is difficult. And so, we welcome ideas about how people can advocate more strongly for things that would benefit them in terms of their health. It involves showing up at the local community meetings that are held at the various town councils, asking questions of those local officials about what they have approached that fund for using that money and what they've spent it on. Hopefully that's helpful, John. I know it's not the most rosy or encouraging report, though.
Yeah, and I would just add that there's not a lot of information that's shared publicly about these, like even who's on these groups that make these decisions. It's the classic divide and conquer kind of approach. Everybody gets a little bit of something, so everybody's got some vested interest in keeping their mouth shut. And on the other hand, when you look at multi-million-dollar fines, $2-3 million for a company such as U.S. Steel, it's almost irrelevant. Matt used the term, or others used the term, pay to pollute. It's easier than solving the problem, and it's an unfortunate reality.
We did the math. I just want to add, just to make that a little bit more concrete. We did the math. In February, the health department fined U.S. Steel, I think it was $1.7 million. If you equate that fine to their earnings before income taxes, depreciation, and so on, that's like asking U.S. Steel to buy a fast food meal. This latest round of $4.6 million fine that just happened, 2 weeks ago, that's like asking them to go out and buy dinner for a family of 4 at Applebee's. So these are not high barrier fines that are being imposed on the company.
Thank you, Matt. I think next up we've got E. Shaw.
Yeah, that's me, Eddie Shaw.
Eddie, great. Yeah, you're in one of the videos. If you can show your camera, we'd love to see your face, but you don't have to.
I'm not exactly sure how to do that, but does this
yes,
do anything?
There you go. There you go.
Okay. I am not a technological genius, but from listening, this is about the 4th or 5th meeting I've been to via Zoom. And I did go to the last meeting in person at Clairton when the U.S. Steel was, or the health department was deciding whether to give U.S. Steel a permit. It is my opinion as a layperson, from listening to all the people, that U.S. Steel's strategy is a simple one. They do not want to put a penny into the Mon Valley work. They'd rather buy Marathon Oil for X billion of dollars and Arkansas mini mill for X billion. And they want to run this place into the ground, and the cost is our health. That's my considered opinion from listening to other people. I don't know much about, I can't go into more depth than that, but that's my conclusion, and I throw it out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Eddie, very much. Yeah, I think there's some, it's tough to think about, but we need to think about those kinds of things. Thank you. I think Rosemary and then Sue.
He's right. Definitely, he's right. A couple other issues with a community benefit trust. First of all, they propose these fines, but U.S. Steel won't pay near what those fines are because they're going to litigate them down, and they'll go back to the Allegheny Health Department. A lot of the violations will get canceled. So that's less money to be spread amongst the communities. And I've never been able to find out how they pick the members of the community that get to attend these. Are these truly people that are affected, that are sitting on these committees, that can make a good judgment as how this money is to be spent? And I'm suspect that that's not the case, but I don't know. But that's always been a concern of mine. I haven't really been able to find out that process. So those are two other concerns with that, in addition to what Matt spoke of.
Thank you, Rose. Appreciate it. And Sue has an additional comment. Please, Sue, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I don't. My hand just didn't come down. I'm not sure how to lower it.
Okay, we'll see if I can lower it for you. Is there anybody else who has a comment, a question? There's some really interesting information being shared in the chat.
Well, in the meantime, I'll just say a few words by way of closing, unless somebody else jumps in. I thought this was a great session, heartfelt presentations from people who know the reality and live the reality. I'll repeat what I said initially, which is our goal is to work with a group of elected officials at various levels of government who are willing to sit down and have a serious conversation with us about how they might engage with the community. Now, over 1,000 of us and others, I'm sure, who would be interested, to speak about how do we create a healthier vision? How do we take the 5 points that Patty spoke about, and if we agree those are realistic goals, begin to talk with the leadership in this arena, in this community, about how we can engage in making a difference. There's no question in my mind that we have an absence of leadership willing to step up to the plate, address these issues, and do something about it. It doesn't mean on day one that it has to be an attack on anybody, but the crystal ball, you don't need a crystal ball to see what's happening. We're going to lose U.S. Steel. Are we going to become the petrochemical center of this part of the country? We've got a $6.5 billion plant being built by Shell. Are we going to have 5 more of those? Is that our future? Or is our future built upon the high-tech companies that have come to our region in recent years? Apple's here. The Rand Corporation showed up here. Google's here. We could do things together with Carnegie Mellon University, University of Pittsburgh. We have other universities. And in many ways, this is a university town. Why aren't we looking at how do we mobilize those resources for the good that can happen to create a 21st century vision of our area? There's no question that the steel industry and heavy industry built this region. It's not going to sustain this region. So that's what comes next. So every time we've had a town hall, I've been asked by people, so what are you asking us to do? What we're asking is for us to be able to put such a coalition together, to get your voices included, and see if we can take that to the next level. I'm optimistic that we can make a difference, and we'll try to do that. I see Patty's got her hand up again, so we would love to hear more.
But also Christine had her hand up, and then we can go to Patty.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Problem. Thank you so much, Howard. I really appreciate your comments and convening this. And to all the speakers, thank you so much for sharing your lived experience. I just want to follow on one thing, Howard, that you're bringing up, and to address this to some of the leaders on this call. I see Paul Klein and Erica Strasburger have joined, and maybe there are others. I want to thank Erica Strasburger, who's my councilwoman for my district. It is fantastic that you're here and listening and engaged, and I know you have been in many ways in the past. I would like to ask directly if you would be willing to convene other council members who are sympathetic to the suffering that's going on with our air pollution experience here in the county, in the city. If you would convene your fellow council persons at the city level and the county level, and to meet together to bring both county council and city council together on a regular, consistent basis to start tackling these issues within government and with us as citizens. If you could make that commitment, it would be fantastic. We are, I think, beyond the point where we need your collective help in this. So I just posit that. I don't mean to put you on the spot, and feel free to, maybe answer offline another time. But since you're here, I just phrased that. Thank you.
I would actually like to speak to that, Christine. Thank you for that. But
Sure.
I think, we have to, first of all, get a union plan for the Mon Valley. What do we want? And then we need to organize our elected officials at all levels, the state, the federal, the local, around getting those things accomplished. I don't think any of us can do this alone. I think we need to be colleagues to each other. We need to listen to each other. And we need to really be serious about what we want to have for the future of our communities. We don't want the pollution, but we do want good jobs. And we can have both. In fact, if we don't have both, we will have neither, because we are facing a time when continuing to burn fossil fuels is not going to be possible. And we have all of these wonderful innovations coming out of, they're spinning off companies every week out of CMU and Pitt and Duquesne, but the pilot projects don't always happen here. The build outs don't always happen here. The new enterprises don't always happen in here. We have to make sure that they do.
Thank you, Patty. There are lots of hands now, and I want to get to everybody, but I also want to ask, let's see, I think we had Barb Pace. You've been raising your hand physically, and so you need to speak. Please unmute yourself if you can, or I can unmute you, and then share with us your comment, and then we'll proceed with the others who've raised their hand digitally. If you are raising your hand, I can't see everybody all the time, so please feel free to put in the chat that you are raising your hand or something like that if you are not raising your hand digitally. Barbara, please.
Yeah, I've been very blessed to meet you, Pat DeMarco, many really wonderful, loving people that are caring about the planet in general. Probably about 10 years ago, Mark, when you were down releasing the video that Patty DeMarco did on Rachel Carson. So that was my introduction to all this. And I think it's about 10 years ago. But as I watched these numbers drop down, we started out with 92 people. We're dropping down to 73, 72 people. I'm betting that the biggest proportion of us are all part of the choir. And that's the thing that drives me crazy from the very beginning. We need to get the damn Fitzgeralds and the people that have the power to seduce these companies in here to listen to us It's not all our collaboratives. We know when we love Matt. I felt his passion. He was about ready to cry. When I see him, I'm going to give him a hug. His passion, Pat's research, they're all wonderful, wonderful things, but we need to get behind and put politicians who are bringing these people in here, the people that really care. That's where the power is. I mean, Pat DeMarco kept saying, we have the power, we have the power. As long as Fitzgerald is in there, as long as he's picking who's in charge of Allegheny County Health Department, we don't have the power. We need to be focused on that. And God bless all you collaborative people that are working your butts off. But we need to make the rest of the people who aren't on this call. And I'd love to know who are the politicians that are really listening on this call. I'm done. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I think Ed was going to speak next. Patty, is your hand still up?
No.
Okay, I'll take it down. Yep, or you can take it down. All right. Thank you, Ed. Go ahead. And I've got some comments also, Barbara. I've got a couple of reflections as people are building up their comments, so I'll chime in a moment. But first, Ed.
Hi. Since Erica Strasburger and Anita Prizio, two of my favorite elected representatives, are on the call, I just want to give a shout out to Glenn Olshurst and his wife, Barbara Tellerico, for their selfless work in trying to protect us from the dangers of freight rail with the Rail Pollution Protection Pittsburgh work that they're doing. And Matt is a big part of that as well. So we'll be reaching out to both of you, and please help us to protect our region's citizens from preventable harms from rail freight. And thanks to everyone on the call.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for that shout out. And I second it. Super. I think Christine had something to say.
I think my hand is just still up. I apologize.
Okay. Then I think we had Sinan. If you could also tell us how to pronounce your name, I'd love to know.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sorry if my voice is sounding weird. I didn't get sleep because of all this air. And all day I was looking at a new environmental justice policy that state of Pennsylvania is trying to create through the public comments, which as of today, I think started. And I was there at 5 p.m. They held a public hearing to collect those comments on the new environmental justice policy and processes of permits. And there was only one resident. I'm not talking about the city of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, or southwestern Pennsylvania. Throughout the Pennsylvania, there was only one resident spoke up about the policy. I know it's not consequential probably to comment on those policies, and we are sick of talking in those public hearings. But still, it is important to voice what we voice here. There as well to Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protections and Office of Environmental Justice are collecting those comments and trying to include the voices that we are trying to raise. So one of the things that I think is to just show up, just to be present, just to talk about this issue in a larger setting as well, especially in the state level, to draw attention. It might not be in our best interest to draw attention by the bureaucrats there or the staffers, but I'm sure it will have some effect in elected officials as well as policymakers in that sense. And yes, my name is pronounced Sinan. Thank you for caring about that, Mark. I appreciate this meeting has been great and very moving.
Thank you very much. And I want to encourage everybody to know that there is a thriving Twitter community around air quality issues, a variety of groups, the Breathe Project, at Breathe Project, or at GASP, also at GASP PGH, I think, is another Twitter. So I know that not everybody's on every media platform, but there are a lot of people talking about these issues on Twitter. And I think, Barbara, that's one way that we are able to kind of connect a little more casually with various other people when they see their friends and colleagues sort of tweeting and retweeting. Sometimes they see people encountering these types of posts on Facebook and other social media platforms. But also I think that there are a range of tools that are out there that allow for these sort of casual conversations between people who are not necessarily passionate eco advocates, but who are kind of upset about the smells or frustrated by the status quo. And apps like the Smell Pittsburgh app are kind of a cool thing to share with a friend or a neighbor or something, that you don't have to like fill their ear with the misery of being in an air polluted region. You can just say, oh, hey, yeah, I smell it too sometimes. And there's this cool app you can submit via this, and you can see what other people are submitting, and then just leave it at that. And then sort of let them kind of, find their own way into this. And then maybe they'll encounter the network of 100 some odd purple air monitors all through the region and be able to see maybe there's one near them. And so they don't have to be an activist so much, but then they see that there is a community that is building agency and changing power and kind of understanding their own narrative, on their own terms. And when people have that information for themselves and are able to generate it from themselves, I think that changes at least it does for me, it changes my own self-perception of the power at play. And then eventually you see the health department do strange things like deploy their own low-cost monitors to understand where the smells are coming from, and then indicate and charge U.S. Steel with a violation for hydrogen sulfide emissions, solely blaming U.S. Steel for the hydrogen sulfide exceedances at the Liberty Claritin monitor. I think these are things that don't just happen accidentally at the health department. I think they come from years and years of advocacy and generations of people building off of the creative, clever, and non-stop work of the previous generations. And also though, I think there is an infinite supply of potential for ways to engage people in a sort of in a gradual ramping up kind of way that can meet people wherever they are on their level of concern or agitation around these issues. But the town halls are a great clearinghouse for more ideas like that. So please keep bringing them. Howard.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on two quick things. Barb paces, it's easy to get a little bit morose when you look at these issues and say what's going to happen. And you can make the case that to a certain extent we're talking to ourselves, but we had a lot of new people sign on this time. And we are building a constituency. And I think what's most important is we've maintained momentum. This is our sixth town hall. So often what happens in these arenas is you get the one and done phenomenon. You have a rally, you do something, and then what happens afterwards? So we are trying to keep the ball rolling, and I think that's good. And I believe that we do have a strategy that can help to make a difference. It's slow, it's not as quick as we would wish. And, I just wanted to reference what Sinan said, or at least some of the part of what he said about having the chance to comment to, governmental authorities or whatever. Oftentimes the comments are, it's a pro forma thing. They have to do it. They have to open up for commentary. And you wonder, where do the comments go? Does anybody even track them? On the other hand, we have a new administration. We have new people at the EPA. I believe there are opportunities to reach out to them. Some of them are actually happening. And that between that and the fact that we need to realize that to the extent that the Allegheny County Health Department is charged with the responsibility of doing something about these issues, they're not well staffed. They don't have significant funding. They don't have enough funding, that's for sure. And, capacity building, being advocates for the next administration. Rich Fitzgerald is term limited. He's not going to run again. There will be another Allegheny County executive. Hopefully it'll be somebody that's amenable to thinking about why aren't we investing more in an issue around air pollution that really cuts to the reason why this isn't a growing community. We're barely above 300,000 people when we once had 650,000 people in this region. So we have to think about what's going to grow this region. And, we have $1 billion, $1.5 billion being invested in a new airport. Some would say we needed it. I don't really believe we did. But we only have $12 million invested in our health department, half of which comes from fees. So the county itself is only putting $6 million into it. So there are all kinds of ways of attacking these issues. I think all of them have opportunities for us to make a difference, and we just need to coalesce and focus, and hopefully we will. So unless there's more commentary, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to show up. I'm impressed, that Barb saw it as a negative a bit, which I understand. We still got 68 people on this call. Tells me people care. We had almost 100 people on this call at one time or another, and we had 145 or 150 people registered. So every little bit helps. And thank you, and stay with us.